Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world with self-care strategies from Chinese medicine. I'm your host, Brody Welch, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity. I'm your host, Brody Welch, and today's episode is for you if you're interested in having more energy, staying young, and either helping you deal with or prevent a lot of the major age-related illnesses from cardiovascular disease, diabetes, neurodegenerative stuff, arthritis, cancer, as well as healthy skin, eyes, and muscles. This is one of those episodes where, spoiler alert, there might be a geek out happening between me and a fellow Chinese medicine acu nerd who also likes to blend paradigms and kind of speak from both the Chinese medicine perspective as well as getting into the science that we have available to us about how to stay well. My guest today is Warren Cargal, who is a licensed acupuncturist, herbalist, and diplomat with the National Certification Commission for Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine, the NCCAOM, which is our national certification body with a very cumbersome and politically incorrect name. He has practiced Chinese medicine for over 20 years, and he practices in Atlanta, Georgia. He's also written a book called Your Mitochondria, Key to Health and Longevity, which is available on Amazon and is a must-read for anybody wanting a healthier lifestyle. Warren, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, Brody. Thank you, fellow acupuncturist, for having me.
Absolutely. We got to stick together, us snow leopards. So I'd love to know a little bit about your journey from Chinese medicine practitioner to beyond, to writing this book, to supplying herb formulas and supplements and things like that, all the stuff that you're doing, writing and researching. Usually, in my practice at least, the things that I went on to create were largely patient driven. It was like, wow, I'm so sick of saying this 100 times. Maybe it should be written down somewhere. And so I'm curious what your evolution was like as a practitioner and into what you're doing now.
Well, my evolution here was as I was a busy single practitioner. And one of the things that would consistently happen is people would call in. So I use Chinese herbs, and people would call in and, they'd put orders in over the telephone. Say, okay, I need to replace this formula, or here's my credit card number. Or they'd show up at the clinic and they'd want me to do that. And, it ended up taking a lot of little extra time for me. And so one day I said, okay, I'm going to try to make this simple for myself. And so I came up with like a little website, and I offered people a little bit of a discount, like to encourage them to go online and order the supplements that they needed so we could, fill them in a timely manner here in the clinic. And that thing kind of took off. And, at this point, we sell Chinese herbs and supplements all over the world.
Wow. So what was just kind of a need for your patients? Like they needed their herbs, like yep. You didn't have the time. Yep. So you created something that's actually, I love that. That is an amazing example of being in alignment with your own values and as well as being of service. That is such a cool blend. Awesome. And that website is acuatlanta.net, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, cool.
And
Great.
So, at that level, I get to talk to people all over the world about, various Chinese herbal issues. Because we have practitioners on the clinic, on the site that, you can get a consult for free. Because as you probably already, as you well know, that many of the Chinese herbs are so versatile, like Ganmaling, for common colds, or, Baiyan Pian. And it's just, they're just very versatile and very easy to use for people. So at that level, I really support that. Okay, so again, it was a problem. And so here at the clinic, we have 6 practitioners, and we have a large fertility clinic here. So one of the things I started noticing over and over again, that we'd help get a woman's cycle normalized, and then she would be able to conceive, would happen like within the first 1 or 2 or 3 months, the pregnancy would fail, right? I, kept seeing that over and over again and could not figure it out. So I started doing some research around it. So one of the first things I realized, so within the first 3 months of conception, what happens is that single herb goes through this tremendous spurt of growth, and it goes from a single cell into a million cells and starts diversifying and all that. Well, all of that is driven by the mitochondria, and that, growth is from the energy of the mitochondria. And not only that, the embryo has like 100,000 mitochondria within it. Compared to a heart muscle cell, which is beating, 24 hours a day, heart muscle cell may have 5,000 to 8,000 mitochondria in it. So this egg is just huge. And so the quality of the mitochondria, fundamentally will affect the viability of the pregnancy. With that in mind, I kind of modified our herbal approach to bring in some supplements for the mitochondria. But then, when I started researching this a little bit more, as I mentioned to you earlier on when we were yucking around there, in the Yellow Emperor's book, there was a reference in there about, the majority of the essence is inherited from the female. So essence in Chinese medicine is, how strong, the offspring's life will be, how much energy it will be.
You're referring to Jing, this concept that we have in Chinese medicine of our fundamental essence that is inherited from our parents via our DNA and determines kind of the overall strength of our constitution, that we're going to have throughout our entire life, but also kind of contains our unique gifts and sort of it's everything innate that we come in with. And so making sure that if we have healthy Jing, that are the likelihood of having a healthy offspring, especially apparently if for the woman in the equation who is giving birth or who is becoming fertile or becoming pregnant. So there is this idea that mitochondria they're one of the drivers of Jing in terms of the development of fetus. And then I imagine if we continue Jing through the life cycle, let's get into that a little bit, because obviously this podcast is not for pregnant women only. This is for the rest of us. And so what's the role that Jing has to play throughout our lives?
Well, so, the statement of facts was in Chinese medicine that Jing declines, right? And they would give various milestones when you're 20 or 40.
When you're 40, half your Jing is gone, right? It's very depressing to think about it.
Yeah. And, back then, that's probably correct. But there are things that you can do specifically to rebuild the Jing. Now, you and I know, there are Jing essence herbs out there. And that was often discussed.
Yes.
Wang Qi or, Romania, or those were always the kind of essence formulas, Ho Shu Wu. So I want to just add two little points in here about my discussion of the mitochondria so that to give you the full picture here. So the first thing was that, I mentioned about the essence coming predominantly from the woman. And it so happens that at fertilization, when the sperm unites with the egg, so those sperm cells have 100 mitochondria in it. And they unite with this huge orbiting
100,000 mitochondrial.
It's all hell the queen, right? Yeah. Anyway, the queen immediately kills off all those mitochondria from the sperm. And so the mitochondria that you and I have are all directly inherited from our mother and so on down the line. And so, recently they've been able to identify a mitochondrial Eve.
Interesting.
Isn't that fascinating?
So mitochondria, just to make this real for people, maybe you remember from science class that mitochondria have a role in energy production, but what else do mitochondria do? And, for those listening who are mitochondria, what should I know about this? And also just the suspicion that mitochondria aren't even innately human, that they come from somewhere else is also really...
like Luke Skywalker, right?
Exactly, that they're aliens. Anyway, so could you unpack for us a little bit about the role of mitochondria in the body?
Yeah, okay, so let's go back on the Wayback Machine here. Millions of years ago, the planet was just populated by single-cell organisms. And those rascals could only grow so big. They took in their nutrients from the surrounding environment, the ocean that they live in, and just kind of osmosis-like. But the issue was they could only grow so big before they would be smashed or collapsed by the gravity. So there were limitations there. And someplace in the distant past, one of them ingest another one, and the one that was ingested say, look, let's make a deal here. I'll live inside of you and produce your energy, and in return, you just feed me the nutrients. And so the statement of fact here is that mitochondria are symbiotes that exist within us, and they have their own DNA. Now, is that amazing?
Yes. Yes, it is amazing. And even more, I mean, we talk a lot on this show about how we are an ecosystem,
Yep.
both literally in terms of how like our gut flora and our skin microbiome and all that, just like all the cells that are not us that live within us,
Yep.
but the fact that is inside the cells of our body that power our cells has actually a different DNA is also really interesting. And then of course, like blowing it out to the macro level, the fact that like we are not individuals that are separate from the environment. In Chinese medicine, we are in fact everything that we're around, everything that we're taking in and that we're exposed to, whether that's from food or the people around us or nature or the media that we're exposed to, all of that is informing our ecosystem and the quality of our qi. And so it's like, anyway, so we are ecosystems both within and without, and even within an individual cell. Wow.
Yeah, right. So then, as you've pointed out, what happens is the mitochondria, they live in our cells. They're called organelles, which means small bodies, and they produce ATP, which is, I'm not going to give you the full name of it because really ATP is what's known as the energy currency of the body, and it produces, it drives all of the molecular functions going on with the body. So I made reference to a heart muscle, so a heart muscle cell, it expands and it contracts, and that's what drives the rhythmical 24-hour-a-day pulsations of your heart, millions of heart muscles, and all powered by the mitochondria producing ATP, within the heart muscle cell.
So that's really, it has basically any process in the body we can think about as being driven by mitochondria?
Let's just keep it simple.
Yeah.
Like in the brain, all the nerve impulses going on. Every nerve impulse requires ATP produced from mitochondria to drive that nerve impulse down our electrical wiring, so to speak.
So these are really fundamental things. And it really, like we think about yin and yang as the fundamentals in Chinese medicine that need to be in balance. And so ATP could be thought of as like a very young thing in the body, a very young molecule, in that it is the thing that is the doer, right? It's like it will set off that electrical signaling.
Yep. It's so fundamental. And then like at the level of the eye, the eye has, a high concentration. Of course, the queen has the highest concentration. But the eye...
Right. If you want to grow an entire new being, you need the highest concentration.
That's
okay.
Right.
And within individual organs.
The eye has a high concentration, and because it takes those light waves, ultraviolet light waves, and converts them into nerve impulses to send to the brain to, create an image that we're seeing right now. So, they're very high concentration, the mitochondria produce the ATP to drive those nerve impulses.
Okay, so I'm hearing a trend here, nerve impulses. So it's part of our neurophysiology of the brain, of the eyes. Yeah, what else?
Well, all the muscles require, every musculature movement, whether it's smooth or involuntary, requires ATP for the contractions and the expansions.
So basically, we can't move or digest anything without ATP either.
Right.
Okay. So really, like it is, if we're thinking about this from a Chinese medicine framework, it has not only to do with the quality of the Jing, like this fundamental essence that, by the way, declines as we age and declines. And if we want to slow down the rate of Jing, this is sort of one of the themes that I come back to in the podcast a lot, that we can slow down our rate of consumption of Jing, dipping into our reserves by living in balance, by simply allowing the food that we eat, the air that we breathe, the positive digestion of our life experience, the amount of sleep we're getting, just all of that to be commensurate with our output, right? Because it's like, it has to be in balance. And when it isn't, when we're doing too much, or if there's any of these things are lacking, is when we really start to dip into that reserve energy of the Jing. And therefore things start to break down and we start to age in a sense. So this has to do not only with Jing, but with Qi, the quality of our energy, the quality of the functioning of the body itself. It's multi-layered here. In a culture that glorifies busyness, it's easy to overextend ourselves, making the days longer by making the nights shorter, working through lunch, blowing off exercise, beating ourselves up for not meeting our own impossibly high standards. It can be really easy not to notice that comfort behaviors like numbing out with Netflix and a bag of chips have become regular substitutes for feeling connected to ourselves, loved ones, our intuition, and creativity. Until you realize that you're not in the body that you want. You're not experiencing the joy that you want, but that you don't know quite how to break out of the cycle. It's time to put yourself at the top of your own to-do list and start embodying self-respect. What might that look like? You'd get enough rest. Eat, move, breathe, and connect in ways that honor your being, not just your doing. You'd set boundaries to have more time for what matters most. You'd feel less stressed, more calm and confident. You'd feel lighter and more comfortable in your body. And leading by example, you'd help everyone around you do the same. That's how we roll in my Level Up group. See, I believe that you have the right to take care of yourself, even before all the work is done, and that when you do, you get more done in less time and are able to show up for the people that you love with kindness and patience. I'm looking for 5 people who are ready to start practicing self-respect this September in the next round of Level Up. It's hard to go against the grain of an entire culture by yourself and way easier in community. If you're ready to start honoring your being, visit the Level Up page at brodywelch.com and schedule a discovery call with me. If it's a good fit, I'll invite you to join this life-changing community. That's Brody with an IE, Welch with a CH, and hop on my calendar. Now back to the show. What do our mitochondria need from us?
Well, that's a great question. So here's how that breaks down. So there's, in the book, I've identified like 4 fundamental things that, someone can start today to do to nourish their mitochondria and extend, their life and have a healthy life during that period. So, the first thing, as you kind of pointed on, is breath. And breathing, for example. So I'm sitting in my chair today. Sometimes I end up spending too much time in my chair. And at the fundamental level, the mitochondria are like little engines. You could look at them as little engines. And what they require is oxygen to produce the ATP. So when I'm sitting at my desk, what's going on with me is I'm doing shallow breathing, which drives hypoxia. Hypoxia is low oxygen content within the body. So that's fundamentally going to affect the vitality and the performance of the mitochondria. And so at that level, what it's going to do is produce reactive oxygen species, which is a volatile oxygen that can damage the mitochondria DNA. It can punch holes in the mitochondria, which allows it to leak, stuff like that.
So not breathing well hurts our mitochondria.
You got it.
So, and if we can underscore that even a little bit more, a lot of times people don't necessarily get that we don't take in energy, we create energy, and that we can get it from food. But the other half of the energy equation is air, right? Mm-hmm. Oxygen is required for us to feel energized at a cellular level. We need that for the cellular respiration process. And we need it in order to, we all know that if you, after exercise, your brain can feel clear and focused, and it's a way of waking up your cells and waking up your consciousness to do the work you have to do. So in other words, taking time every day to breathe deeply could be something that we do to both feel energetic, but also to actually potentially help our mitochondria.
You got it.
Cool.
It's really simple,
It seems like we just made a case for some Qigong also.
I just finished a second book, and one of the totally fascinating things I found out was they had done experiments. There's been several number of experiments done where they've taken animals and they really caloric monitoring them with how much energy they take in and how much energy they excrete. And it turns out it's like a 28% discrepancy that the body is generating more energy than it's taking in from nutrients like food. So, which succinctly addresses what you're talking about, like the chi, the energy in the air that we breathe.
28%.
Isn't that amazing?
I love that there's a number to it. That's very cool.
Yep.
So 28% it's not nothing, right? It's a significant amount of energy that we're getting from the air.
Somewhere.
From somewhere, somehow. I'm going to take it on faith that breathing is good for us.
Yeah. So the second thing that's really important here is mild exercise. I'm not saying strenuous exercise. If you're doing that, that's fine, but mild exercise like walking or riding a bike or something, that drives biogenesis, which is production of new mitochondria. And it also kind of fires up the mitochondria to clear out any of this reactive oxygen species and, neutralize it. So mild exercise is really good. So, as we're talking about, to follow that thread, you're walking and you're breathing and you're settling your mind also, just for another one.
And you're moving your liver chi, which is
right.
taking down your stress levels. So yeah, it's like walking's awesome. How much walking do you recommend?
I recommend like about 20 minutes a day. That's, it's not like your whole day. You're getting outside, you're breathing in the fresh air, you're walking. Most people can handle that. So then the third thing here is caloric restriction. And at that level, you're moving from, if you're doing 2,500 calories a day, you move down to like 2,100 or 2,200. A small reduction, because the problem is in our society, if we're not moving, we're not breathing, and we're sitting and thinking all day, but that creates like a backup of nutrients. Remember the original agreement with those two single cell organisms? I'll produce the energy, you produce the nutrients. Well, if there's excessive nutrients being produced that are not being used, they just stay within the mitochondria and then they start creating problems again, all kind of problems.
So like the assembly line is moving too fast, and like basically the mitochondria are then kind of being suffocated by all this that's being produced. There is like suddenly there's a room full of boxes and no room for the mitochondria to do their thing.
Yeah. Well, actually, within the mitochondria themselves, it will, the process will slow. It's called the electron transport, process, or electron transport chain, but that will slow down and it gets backed up and all those electrons start leaking and they can cause, inflammatory processes all over the body.
So I'm imagining a big pile of electrons on the floor of the mitochondrial room, leaking stuff that isn't good for us. So so it's basically like a nuclear reactor having a little meltdown.
That's totally correct. And it's a great way to look at it, because we're dealing at this level of the game here. We're at the level of electrons. We're moving electrons back and forth. So we're almost at a level of quantum, on a quantum level. But, there's all of these processes that are going on within the body at the molecular level that are totally fascinating. And just one quick thing is that they begin to deconstruct this rigid image that we have of ourselves as a solid body.
That's my favorite thing to do, is to one of my favorite questions to ask people is, are you a sack of meat or a living river of energy, or, living sea of energy? Because both are true, right? It's just a question of whether we're looking from a Newtonian physics or a quantum perspective.
Yeah, so true.
Okay, so our mitochondria want us to breathe. They want us to not overeat. Within the realm of food, are there specific things that our mitochondria either really like or really don't like?
Yes, so here's the fourth thing. So the mitochondria can use various sources of energy, but their preferred sources of energy, not the preferred, but they can use like sugars and carbohydrates and fats. And so, for example, for every unit of sugar you take, the mitochondria takes in, it's going to produce 2 ATPs of energy, right? But on the other hand, for every unit of fat that goes into the mitochondria, you're going to get like 32 units of ATP out. It's like a phenomenal difference. It's a huge difference, which directly, it's like vitality. That's what we're talking about there.
Wow. 32 is... So we're talking exponentially more energy available. Can you just quickly clarify, like people who are like, I thought we burned glucose for fuel. Like what's up with that? That's sugar.
Yeah. Well, the statement would be that fast growing cells, i.e. cancer, which is the hallmark of cancer, its aggressive nature, uses a lot of sugar and glucose. And that's one of the problems. It's like if you're predominantly, loading on sugars and carbohydrates, that's really not good. And that drives these inflammatory processes. But for sure, the mitochondria can use glucose or sugars, to generate ATP. But the most efficient way is with fats. The more energy you're going to get. And that will specifically address that issue. People say, oh man, I feel fatigued. And so you start, exploring what they're eating, and they're having, sugar or, croissant in the morning with a cup of coffee. And then, they kind of feel let down in the evening, around 10 or 11. And it's, just they're sources of energy. So to clarify what I mean by, fats, that would be avocados, olive oils, that would be, fats from fish. It could be fats from, good quality meats. I mean, a fat is a fat to the mitochondria, but they love them.
Okay. And yet a fat is not a fat to the rest of the body, right? Like we're not going to be treating our mitochondria well if we're feeding it trans fats or rancid oils, correct?
Yep.
So we talked a little bit about like aging as this decline of Jing, right? This sort of like having less. And that's often something that I hear from patients when they come in and they said like, what, like, I'm just really tired. I don't have the energy that I used to have. Do you buy that? Like, do you think like, and they think I must be getting old? To me, I get all sorts of red flags from that statement. How do you respond to that?
Oh, well, gosh. I mean, that's a difficult one because, in the context of the mitochondria, there definitely are things that you can do to improve your energy output. And there's also, supplements that I suggest in the book to improve energy output. From a quantum view, which we just talked about a little bit about the electrons and everything, there's a statement there about the collapse of the wave function, which is that you're basically creating what you're living here. Does that make sense? Is that too radical?
Yeah. In other words, your lifestyle is contributing to the fact that you're tired?
No, what you think is what you're creating.
What you think is what you're creating. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So, and that would be a fundamental Buddhist concept also around suffering. The suffering, that we create for ourselves by
Absolutely.
Our thoughts and things like that. So,
well, and in Chinese medicine too, right? That where the attention goes, energy flows, right? Yi Dao, Qi Dao.
Yep.
All that. Okay. So first of all, it's a mindset thing. They need to be thinking differently.
Well, it's hard to tell people that, right? If you've been, it's hard to tell. You can't tell anyone anything, but, especially if you've been brought up in a traditional allopathic, family where, okay, if something's going on for you, you're going to go visit the doctor. Those are difficult, deep-rooted beliefs and concepts to overcome.
Right. It requires a certain amount of very intentionally changing your paradigm.
Settling the mind.
And yet there also can be very real things that they can do, like as we've been talking about, things like breathing differently and eating differently that they can do to have more energy. And you mentioned supplements, and I'd love to talk a little bit about herbs. And herbs, obviously, we have to get kind of specific about the fact that this is, first of all, not medical advice, and it's not like a one-size-fits-all scenario, because certain herbs that support the Jing are going to be much more heavy and dense and support the Yin, and certain herbs are going to be really fiery and heating to the body and more Yang. And so therefore, that if you can't digest the heavier stuff, or if you already have too much heat, too much fire going on in the body, then a lot of the hotter herbs aren't necessarily going to be appropriate. So I have a two-part question. One is that, do you have favorite herb friends for the aging process or to help with energy? And similarly with supplements, is there a supplement that is sort of across the board that that people can see results with, as opposed to just having it be theoretically good for them?
Yep. Let me give you the supplement fix first. First, because that's, and then I'll key that into, one of the age-related issues like arthritis, how you would use Wang Qi for that.
Great.
So there's four fundamental supplements I would suggest, and there's very specific reasonings for this. But the first one is L-carnitine, and I would look at that around 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams a day, which is, you normally get that as a liquid. And the issue with L-carnitine, it's one of the sole supplements that transports fats into the mitochondria. So you really want to make sure, if you're making a switch over there to a fat-based dietary approach, then you really want to make sure you supplement with L-carnitine, right?
Oh, that's really good to know. Because obviously we can't, that in terms of the digestive process, you need to be able to digest the fat, which means gallbladder, liver need to be doing their thing, but also being able to get the fat into the mitochondria, the delivery system. L-carnitine sounds like the kind of thing that can help be the envoy there.
Yep. Okay. So our experience here in the clinic is a lot of times we'll work with people with diabetes and things like that. And what happens is the body has become fixated on a particular energy source, and that energy source typically is carbohydrates and fats. And so when we start making changes, we have to, really do this in a way that will facilitate the mitochondria beginning to pick up the cues to use the fat. So L-carnitine does that. So the second one is CoQ10. And CoQ10 specifically affects the third phase in the mitochondria of stepping up these electrons to a higher charge to make the ATP. And specifically, like a place there's recent research about statins, the effect of statins on depleting CoQ10 in the heart. So, the statins have been traditionally used as a medication for lowering, the cholesterol and dealing with that bad cholesterol.
Right. As kill the firefighters who are there to put out the fires. Let's kill them. That's a great idea. That's
right. Yeah, so that one, I just want to say quickly that one always gets me cranked was because the sole function of what they call bad cholesterol, LDL, is a transporter. LDL is a transporter protein, and it moves cholesterol specifically to the brain. And so now what they're starting to see in research, longitudinal research, is people who have owned statins are starting to have cognitive decline.
Yeah, I'm glad you went there because because wow, it's really hard to talk people out of, of thinking differently about something that is so widely prescribed, and they keep changing the definition of, that really I truly believe in a conspiracy to medicate the healthy, unnecessarily in ways that can be horrifyingly detrimental to our health in the long term. So
I know it's the brain has its own private reserve of cholesterol, and all of our nerves are made from the cholesterol that the LDL transports around. So, okay. So anyway, I don't want to get off of that one, but.
No, it's great. Okay. So, but the point is LDL is not the bad guy that it's been framed up to be here.
Is there really anything bad in the body?
Right. Exactly. Certainly things can be out of balance in the body and need our help with rectifying that.
Okay. So we've got L-carnitine and we've got CoQ10.
And CoQ10. Fantastic.
And the next thing is there's two other things, and that would be D-ribose, which is a 5-carbon sugar. And D-ribose specifically is for repairing the membranes within the mitochondria, which, as I mentioned, sometimes they get holes punched in them by those reactive oxygen species. So you want to keep your mitochondria healthy and functioning so that they'll, give you a long, healthy life. And then the final thing would be magnesium. And magnesium in a glycinate form is good because muscles, when they expand, they have to contract, and that requires magnesium to do that. So, as I've said, all of the muscles are being driven by ATP. So that's that function. So back to Chinese herbs.
Herbs, yes.
So let's look in the context of arthritis. So when you're sitting, and I've said breathing is so important. So you're sitting all day, and what's happening because you're sitting, those muscles under your legs are being contracted, and just the way the pelvis tilts and everything contracts those muscles, and so that further restricts the blood flow of nutrients and qi to the knees. And so then it's not unusual to start seeing arthritic kind of knee conditions. And the issue there is the knee joints are already kind of in a hypoxia environment already. Low oxygen content because they're far away from the heart. So if you're going to further restrict that, you're going to start getting degradation going on. So generally what I will do with people is, I would suggest something like Wang Qi for that, Wang Qi by Ji San or something like that, which is it's a tonifying and nourishing formula for the Wang Qi is astragalus. And so, and we would suggest something like that to help with this particular condition. That's how you would use kind of a Jing essence of herb for that.
I just have to share the idea that in Chinese medicine, the kidneys store the Jing, and the kidneys rule the lower body. They rule the reproductive system. Yep. They rule if you're having knee pain or foot pain or numbness in the lower body, we wonder about the health of the Jing. We wonder about the health of the kidneys in general, the kidney yin and the kidney yang. So so if you're dealing with knee pain, knee arthritis, literally the sitting, it sounds like, is creating a qi stagnation. I'm officially getting a treadmill desk ASAP. I've heard so much. Many different experts.
Just from what you said, here's the imagery. It's the lung has this the diaphragm muscles, which is like a giant diaphragm. And the imagery was always like when you inhale, like you're breathing in, and that acts like a bellows and pulls up the water from the kidney and moistens all of, the heart, lungs, and the brain, all the joints. And so like when you're sitting, that bellows function is not operating. And so there's stagnation occurring in the kidneys there.
Oh, that is a beautiful image. Yeah. And so the idea like that lung 2, one of the highest points in the lung channel, cloud gate, right? You can imagine like the clouds just allowing that moisture to rain down over the lungs and the heart. And like that, like the energy needs to get there. And this is where the movement of daimai, the movement of the belt vessel, like just inhaling and coming down into the pelvis that can create that yin and yang pulsation.
Oh, beautiful. Yep, that's right.
Thanks for going there. So astragalus, or Huang Qi. Yeah, I really like that one too, because it's generally pretty digestible. Like that, it's in a lot of formulas that are for people who are struggling at the level of the qi and not just the level of the jing. And the fact that it targets the spleen and the lungs, which is interesting too. Like that the spleen and the lungs, we don't necessarily associate with the jing, but yet it does. It's helpful for these things. Spleen and lungs are much more, just for our listeners out there, associated with the production of energy in the body, like the kind of chi that we use every day in our lives. Nutritive chi. Exactly. So great. Any other Chinese herbs that you want to give a shout out to?
There's like 4 or 5 of them I talk about in the book, like Wu and things like that. But I mean, and you use them for specific neurodegenerative diseases that are occurring.
Yeah.
But then there's the underlying basic protocol that kind of supplements that, of the supplements.
All right. Any other advice out there for people who are maybe struggling with a neurodegenerative condition? Maybe they have heart disease or arthritis or anything like that, in terms of what they could be doing to take care of themselves and their mitochondria?
Yes. Well, this one's really important. So I've mentioned that how the mitochondria drive the ATP drives the nerve impulses in the brain, right? So recent research has discovered, we've always known there's been a lymphatic system in the body, but for some reason, again, one of these places where I drop off the map, they've envisioned that the lymphatic system only goes as far as the neck.
Right. Until 2016, this was thought by the medical establishment, right?
So, and lo and behold, they find out that it goes up into the brain.
There's something called the glymphatic system, which makes sense because our brains also need to detoxify. And
that's right.
Incidentally, most of that detoxification happens while we are sleeping.
So this is like another giveaway for you guys. So here's what happens. I've indicated that like in the brain, these ATP is driving things, but if things get clogged up or slow or sluggish, it produces ROS, the reactive oxygen species, which is like debris. And that debris begins to accumulate unless there's some, direct way of clearing it. If there's no direct way, if sleeping is difficult or, irregular, sporadic, then you start creating debris, which leads to amyloid plaque buildup, which are the hallmarks for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's diseases and, cognitive decline. So, sleep is just, without even considering the mitochondria here in this equation, and sleep is just fundamental for what's going on in your life.
Amen. Let's all get some sleep. Sounds great. Warren Cargal, this has been such a fun conversation. If people want to read your book or connect with you, where do they go? What do they do?
Well, I made it simple for the book. It's called www.themitobook.com, themitobook.com. And otherwise, they can just go to our website, www.acuatlanta.net. That's ACU Atlanta.net. And also, they can just reach out to me by email at the website. There's a contact us email, and if you've got questions. And the book is available on Amazon also.
Fabulous. I'll make sure all that gets into the show notes. Warren, thanks so much for joining me today.
Brody, it was great yucking around with you, and I really had a lot of fun today.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
This episode is brought to you by my Inner Alchemy Retreat. Hey, what you doing next February? How about you and me and 20 others escape the dark, wet winter and go hang out on a quiet beach in Mexico for a whole week? I'm thinking a world-class retreat center with a 5-star restaurant serving us delicious prana-rich meals, luxury oceanfront bungalows, qigong on the beach,
We could do some breathing and moving and some yoga, maybe some snorkeling and surfing, take a long walk at sunset. We'll pulsate between some deep relaxation and deep inquiry work, looking at ourselves through an elemental lens, how wood, fire, earth, metal, and water are at play in our lives, and grounding these concepts in our bodies. You'll emerge feeling renewed with an armload of new self-care tools and a jump start on who you're becoming in 2019. I've been leading transformational retreats since 2012, and they are powerful in addition to being a total blast. But don't take my word for it. Head over to the Mexico retreat page at brodywelch.com. That's Brody with an IE and Welch with a CH, and read what past retreat peeps have said. Then sign up. You know you want to, and you deserve it. When you claim your spot by August 1st with the promo code PODCAST, you'll receive a free downloadable copy of my most popular meditations, Advice from Your Future Self, the Healthy Eating Meditation, and the Breathing Bundle. So head to brodywelch.com right now and check it out.
Thanks for listening today. For more episodes of A Healthy Curiosity, you can visit the iTunes store. If you appreciated today's show, please leave us a review. This helps other people to find the podcast. You could also head to brodywelch.com, where you can find free self-care resources, learn more about Chinese medicine, and let me know what you'd like to hear about on future episodes. I'd love to hear from you. Till next time, be good to yourself.